Hi everyone. Here, I'll give it 3 minutes until we start so everyone can kind of come in. Hey, hi everyone. So thank you all for coming and joining us in your very busy schedules. And I want to welcome everyone to one of the first Chicago Climate Week Power Hours hosted by IEC. So I'll give a very quick introduction about myself. So my name is Sherry Mahajan. I'm the Conservation Agriculture Policy Manager with IEC. And today we are joined by five panelists across the compost collection, organic waste processing, and landfill industries that will answer questions on the importance of organics diversion and composting systems, including city policy pathways, specifically with Chicago, to support scale and effectiveness. So I'll start with asking them a few questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience for anyone to ask whatever is on their mind. So I think first we can go over introductions, if that's okay with you all.
Perfect. I can go first.
Yeah, do you want to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
My name's Kyle Prus. I am part owner of a company called Block Bins. We do commercial and residential composting in the Chicagoland area, and I am the CMO of the company. So I just work on business development, strategic growth, and just general marketing strategies to grow the composting marketplace in Chicago. Happy to be here. Should I popcorn? Adam.
Yeah, I can go next,
Oh,
Kyle.
Tommy. Okay.
Never mind. Yeah, my name is Tommy. I'm the growth manager here for Waste Not. We do compost collection, some residentially and commercially. We also do some recycling services. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Hello, my name is Adam. I am the engagement coordinator for the Urban Canopies Compost Club. I'm also a member of the Climate Reality Project Chicago Metro. And I want to say that I think it is fantastic that we have three companies all working to improve composting in Chicago. So welcome to Kyle and Tommy, and thank you for all the work that you do. And I think I will popcorn it on to Susanna.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Susanna. I'm with Green Era. We are a recycler of food waste using anaerobic digestion on Chicago's South Side. I'm our business ops manager, so kind of since we're a startup, doing a lot of different things, including marketing, policy, all those kinds of things. And I will pass it to Catherine.
Good afternoon. Catherine Blauvelt. I'm Executive Director of Full Circle Future. We are a national organization that work on our trash problem, landfilling and burning waste, but we come from it from an advocacy perspective. So we work nationally in a bunch of states and it's so cool to be talking with folks today on the panel and those in the virtual room. We have staff in Chicago as well, and we're about moving policy solutions so that we take the $100 billion waste system, which is creating a lot of harm, and get policymakers to move solutions that do some good.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So I'll kick it off with the first question. So, why do you all believe that composting or anaerobic digestion is important, and why should people even bother to participate in it? Whoever wants to jump in can go first.
I'll jump in. I'll throw some statistics at this. First, the big one is methane reduction. Methane is between 30 and 80 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas, depending on the time frame you're measuring. Per the US EPA, 58% of landfill methane emissions are from food waste. Food waste is the single largest contributor of material to landfills. Landfills are the largest source of human methane emissions. All that together means that keeping that food material out of the landfills has a huge impact on methane production and a huge impact on the climate. The second less talked about reason is the benefit of the compost, keeping nutrients in the local ecosystem. The current linear system basically extracts nutrients from one area, ships them to another, and then drops them into a landfill where they do no one any good. So restoring those natural cycles, keeping that all the beneficial nutrients in the ecosystem where either where they came from or where they end up is still much better than throwing those things into landfills.
Yeah, I mean, super thorough stuff. But I think too, a lot of sometimes it's a little bit, you could even do some personal reasons. Just you want to have a positive effect on your own household, and or maybe it's just something that you feel like has skipped a generation, and everybody was doing it previously, and now we're just trying to catch back up to the way things used to be. So I think a lot of it is just um, you know what kind of personal impact do you want to make, and that value can be derived from you want to teach your kids something that you think is part of the future moving forward, so you want to be part of the solution. I think there's a lot of small and large reasons why people do, and that's why we're here to kind of like get into those and tackle those reasons.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll try to figure out the chat function. But if you go to fullcirclefuture.org, we created like a waste impact tracker. So for every state, a lot of this is like invisible, right? So, but there's actually a ton of people who live by landfills within 5 miles in the state of Illinois, and we are stuck with them, and they are going to be creating pollution for many years to come. So it really just like underlines the why it's so important to actually do something good with our scraps or with organic waste and keep it out of the landfill. So I would, and the worst, we're just like finding how bad the problem is. So in Illinois, 75% of all your landfills are near people who already have cancer rates higher than average, right? Like it's that cumulative impact story we're all familiar with. So just the why, we keep learning more because now methane isn't invisible. You can see it from space. There are satellites that are now finding these super methane plumes over landfills in Illinois and other states. So there's just no reason to not do something better. Landfill it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything said for sure. I just want to toss in that like it also is very really helpful for green job growth in the region. So, composting does create more jobs than landfilling food waste would. Um, and those are green jobs that I think, if you're looking to like support the local economy and, I think that there's a lot of talk of like automation taking away jobs right now. Um, yeah, that composting is a great way of investing in creating more green jobs.
Okay, cool. Um, does anybody want to add anything else before I move on? Okay, perfect. So my next question is, so what happens if organic waste just keeps going to landfill instead? And like, what's really at stake for the people that live in Chicago?
I think Chicago, we're lucky we don't have a landfill, active landfill in the city limits. So I think that, might feel a little more disassociated from the air quality. Um, but I think it's something that like we have to do. And also I think, a lot of people understand that we have really bad soil here in Chicago. Like the city itself, due to the fires that have happened over the years, have created really toxic soils in the area. And I'm sure other people on this call can speak to that better than I can. But you know, Adam hit it when he did his initial answer. Part of composting, the importance of it is creating the finished compost, which can be returned to land, which helps things grow. And I think, when we think about food waste as a general problem, a lot of that comes from how far food travels to get to your plate. And if we can create more local ecosystems, food systems, composting is definitely a key part of that.
I'm just kind of curious what Catherine, from a larger zoomed out perspective, thinks about Chicago and just, I guess, a larger kind of
Yeah.
landscape of that question.
Yeah, and I'd say please keep the Q&A function going. I know there's a lot of wisdom that's in the room amongst us all. So Chicagoland has about 15 landfills, and of course, even if a landfill's closed, we've seen instances of landfills that are closed that have explosive levels of methane or can just, it's very pernicious once you put that waste in the ground. It's like a zombie, right? So there is that, like, we just have to responsibly deal with that pollution, of course, so that people in our water and air aren't harmed. Some states have actually upgraded their approach to just like requirements on landfills, and Illinois could do that as well. I was really excited the state did include that as a provision in their big climate plan. But on the upside, on the what we're all working towards, which is let's do something better with our precious resources. NRDC did this like amazing analysis that found we could create almost 15,000 jobs, 15,000 jobs, and hundreds of millions of dollars of economic activity. Like you guys said, local jobs that can't be outsourced or done by AI. And that's all part of this like local economy that, I mean, I would just call it right now, it's just not benefiting very many people, right? It's and harming a lot of people. So I'd say like what we have on the table in the Chicagoland area is literally thousands of jobs and a lot of money that can stay local.
And it's just an archaic system. We've been operating off that kind of, we just haven't seen the value, I guess, in it. What's at stake for Chicagoans? I think it's just value, changing perspective and changing the culture. It comes to like, we have to create some sort of larger marketplace of value for those things and then instill that value amongst the residents so they feel like they're a part of creating that, whether it is the jobs or it's just, creating soil or, whatever angle you want to attack it from. I think that, it's about trying to instill that in a lot of different ways across culture. I see that. I don't know if anyone on here is able to answer this one that Maddie asked, but I would be interested if I cannot. But is there a larger slash smaller danger of organic waste when landfills are located near groundwater or surface water? I know that's, yeah, the answer is like generally yes, but I don't really have any like detail on that. I was wondering maybe if anybody had on the panel more info on that or an answer to that.
I think the short version is organic waste is really wet, right? And you're already landfills generate a ton of leachate, which is just like a fancy word for like think toxic juice, right? Of all the and it's just getting worse, right? Because of the products, as we know, are headed into landfills. But that wet organic waste, and remember, food is the largest single component in any landfill, which like blows your mind, right? Like on average, a quarter is food, which could be healthy soil, which could be, saving money instead of expensive fertilizer, which could be, feeding hungry people. But anyway, so that then helps add to the amount of leachate, which then that leachate could, of course, migrate out of that landfill and into that water body, right? And there should be, obviously requirements to make sure that doesn't happen, but the danger is absolutely there. Got to keep that wet organic waste out of the landfill. It's not doing anything.
And I don't have the information right in front of me, but I understand that the organic material from landfills can run through river systems and then lead to toxic algal blooms at the at the coast or wherever that ends up. It adds a lot more. Those nutrients that could be in our soil are now feeding algal blooms that poison the local ecosystems.
No, I completely agree with you all. It definitely is like a big issue. I'm happy that we have everyone here to like to speak on it and like tell everybody the importance of it. So I guess like shifting focus, like what are the biggest hurdles that you all have faced in your own work with taking in organic waste that has been diverted? And is there a way that the city of Chicago could support you in overcoming them?
So I think on this one, I'll say like right now there are like 4 or 5 like really big haulers, right? Like think about your Waste Managements, your Republics, LRSs, right? And a lot of times these big city contracts, like for Chicago Public Schools, right, or the Park District, they just kind of get awarded to the same people like over and over again. And there's like a lot of money in these contracts too, like millions and millions of dollars, like over years and years and years. And these are not companies that are local. These are not companies that are going to respond to you when you like call them to ask them why they missed your pickup, right? Like everyone here is like a small provider that is like based here, right? And so like I think that's a really big thing is the transparency in the procurement processes. It makes it so that like we actually have competitive bids that we, aren't spending our tax dollars on these like big corporations that are just, like we don't know exactly what they're doing with all and they are owned by BlackRock or by some big money, right? And so I think that kind of both goes into the like local jobs piece, but also does a lot to build our resilience, right? Because we don't have to send our stuff to landfills that are in Indiana or Joliet or 50 miles away. And even if right now those landfills are cheaper than sending to a compost yard, like that will not be the case forever, right?
Yeah, I think it's like Susanna said, it's like about nimble partnerships. If you have infrastructure that is legacy and it's built across a wide variety of recyclables, of landfill, and just trying to basically plug a hole, it doesn't really it allows for things to slip through the cracks. Whereas if you have somebody who specializes in service, they're just going to be more dedicated to that system because they grew up and have worked on shaping that system. So I think some of it is I would agree. It's like that transparency and for us, I think we like to focus on like increasing the marketplace, which I think would be great for everyone. I think the city could do a lot to support us on that side as well. And by marketplace, I basically mean like, pick a random number. Say there's 50,000 people composting in Chicago. Like if the city could create a plan or a scope or some sort of plan of action to build that marketplace up to a step ladder, 100,000 to 250, 500, a million. So increasing that marketplace with like actual plans and ways to achieve that, I think would be a great way for the city to help because, and a lot of that has to do with awareness and a lot of that falls on our individual companies, which, a lot of us are lean and don't have like a lot of infrastructure to raise awareness for an entire, the third largest city in America. So I think that's sometimes that I go back to is having just kind of that support to build the entire infrastructure is what I'd like to see more of.
I
Uh,
think I. Oh, you can go ahead.
I was going to say from the consumer side, I feel like for a lot of the people I speak with, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow that we're asking people to pay for the service of diverting their waste to a compost when landfill is so much cheaper. It's basically included, which is just another example of like passively subsidizing the waste streams of large corporations. So on that end, I think EPR, extended producer responsibility laws, and policies can help shift that cost so that the consumers don't have to bear the brunt of the cost of what is essentially the right thing to do that has no immediate benefit to them. Um, and that would, I think, open up that marketplace a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of address the question Maddie just put in the chat too, about like, are there plans being taken to the city, or is there any engagement with the city? I don't, we haven't talked about it, but like, we're three companies here, or multiple companies, but like in terms of hauling, three companies here who have done a lot of work and have done a lot of like groundwork to educate people on the importance of food waste and why landfills are bad, why composting is important. This is all work we've done to like as a part of building a business. But the city rolled out their food scrap drop off program, which at least to people, at least to me, and was happened overnight without communication to the haulers that have been in business for 10+ years. So I think something that would be helpful is just any sort of heads up or communication from the city about their plans and what timelines look like, and when the time comes to do more broad scale composting across the city. Definitely echo Susanna's like put out more transparent bid opportunities. There's certainly enough composting that would need to happen in the city for all three of our businesses to survive and thrive here, with some collaboration from the city. So, I think there's definitely models around the country on how that can work, and how large municipalities like Boston, DC are good examples of like how you can scale composting programs with collaboration between the municipality and the businesses that have already been doing that work for a long time. So I think we all feel similarly that like we all want to collaborate with the city. Just would love to see that communication line opened up.
And I'll add one last point here is I think there's like kind of like a structural like trust problem that I think we have to address too, right? Like when we recycle things, like do we know where that goes to? And I think like historically, right, like there has been a history in Chicago of like recycling stuff going straight into the landfill, right? A large proportion of it still goes to like offshore, right? Like, spends tons and tons of carbon emissions to get shipped to like Bangladesh or Indonesia or wherever, right? And so I think the city needs to, kind of say like, hey, this is what we're doing with that. There needs to be like information shared about that, data shared about that. And finally, also just to quantify the cost of like how much we are spending on our hauling, right? Because I think the average consumer, like we don't know that versus like it's very tangible when you sign up for urban canopy or block bins or waste not. Like, yes, there's a cost, but like we don't have an actual tangible cost that's being taken out of our tax dollars on the other end, right? And I think when you compare it, like with like, you find out that composting is like a lot cheaper in terms of dealing with the actual problems that we have.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that was said. And I know Kristen, she just asked a question. Is there any particular group that is taking lead on orchestrating companies and stakeholders in Chicago today? As mentioned, there are a lot of solution providers, but with the lack of city coordination, I'm curious if holistic leadership exists. I'm going to throw it to Susanna, if that's okay, to talk about we were working on it at the state level and not like City of Chicago specific, but we were trying to build and coordinate that group. So I'll throw it to Susanna to talk about that.
Yeah, thank you. So if for people who don't know, there was a bill introduced in the Illinois legislature this year, Senate Bill 2852. Effectively, it was a mandate to ban landfilling food and sending it over to compost instead. Who had a lot of really great grassroots support. I think everyone on this call had like signed on to this, and had hearings, and Senator Adrian Johnson was like a great champion for this. Unfortunately, we did stall in this bill. mostly because the waste industry didn't want us to do this. And surprise, surprise, when, your waste management, owns both the hauling to the landfill and actually owns the landfill itself, they maybe don't have the best incentive to to advance that kind of legislation. But I think there's a lot that we can do like on the grassroots end. There's a lot of like very classic like call your legislator, right? Because I think what we're hearing from people from like these state agencies is that like they're really afraid. They're afraid of like the big garbage companies. They're afraid that like if we try to pass this bill, the garbage companies are just going to raise everyone's garbage bills, right? And like that to me that seems like that shouldn't be a power that someone has. I think it says a lot about just like how big corporations can really like flex their muscle in these kinds of politics. And I think while individual composting is always going to be really important, I think we do need these kinds of systemic changes, right? Like me with my like 5 gallon bucket, compared to if we get this law passed, then like Amazon or Tyson Foods or like anyone who has a food manufacturing plant and produces hundreds or if not thousands of tons of food waste a year, they're going to have to comply with the law, right? Like I think it is something that food waste is a problem that needs to be addressed like across sectors. And so in addition to the consumer stuff, we also need to tackle like the largest generators of food waste as well. And I think like as we are working on that in Springfield, IAC, NRDC, a lot of great people are taking the lead on that.
I'd say on the positive side, having worked in other states, and all credit goes to those like solutions providers and the composters and like the zero waste crew in those states. So I'm not taking credit, but I'd say like there are states with higher tipping fees, right? Right. Essentially like the cost of garbage that have moved and said, no, actually, like when we're responsible for this basic infrastructure, just like electric vehicles, just like other, right, like transportation, we're going to make sure there's an actual option for people besides just the gray bin, right? So they did it. They've done it in Seattle. They've done it all up and down the Northeast coast. Maryland moved on it. California. So I'd say like that's the good news is we have now walking and talking big examples of ensuring that we actually fund composting to scale or diversion to scale, and the sky is not falling, right? Like everyone's still okay. So now the question is like, can we do it in the Midwest? And I say, hell yeah, Illinois should be the first state. And it, by the way, is really expensive to expand a landfill. And that's where we're headed. That's what we're going to be spending money on. And not a small amount of money. So it's not like a don't spend any money, spend money scenario.
Exactly. Or you're making like a huge negative impact and you're having to ship things very, very, very far away. Or you're filling up Indiana right next door and then they raise the fees and then now your payment for all that, it increases even more. So I would agree with that. It's just like, you can only push the infrastructure of landfill so far that it just starts to, I mean, at some point there would be a tipping, no pun intended, but a tipping point that, yeah, you'd have to kind of go back and reevaluate like, wow, like maybe this isn't the most, profitable way to do things. So yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing, which is like the other side of the processing side on composting. I know like another barrier to, someone threw something in the chat about like, is there like a organizational effort right now to like do things? And I think that's something on the industry side that is puts people at odds is that a lot of the people that are doing composting of like yard waste right now have like very valid and real concerns about the idea of like opening up the floodgates with forcing people to not forcing, but like requiring more people to compost and what that would mean to their sites. They'd be taking in, I think we've all seen photos of like California compost facilities, and it's not exactly always the cleanest material coming through. I think right now, because people pay such a premium to compost, we definitely don't deal with as much contamination as other states that have these more broad scale laws. And, I think it's totally fair for processors to be worried about how that's gonna work for them. And I know I think Kyle, I know me and you have been on calls with some of those people, and I've heard, I think there's valid debates to be had there. And, when we talk about expanding landfills, Illinois as a state, and I know this was somewhat part of the bill, the Feed and Conserve bill, but making it easier to process food scraps is going to need to happen. You know, really only one facility, to my knowledge, in the area has opened up in the last 10 years that's taking, or even taking, any amount of food scraps. And I know that the process to get that facility open was incredibly financially and burdensome to the people that invested in it. And if we're talking about costs associated with even like sites like Green Era too, these are massive projects that need funding in some capacity, or they need to make it easier to start doing it, or else we can put bins at everyone's house, but if we don't have places that are able to take all that stuff, there's two sides of that equation.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. The infrastructure, you can't just worry about collection and education. It's you have to have the technology, you have to have the facilities, and you're right. I mean, that facility took a long time to get off the ground, and we actually recently had one club. I mean, so we had one open, we had one that ticks on that is now temporarily closed. So it's like there needs to be more places if we're going to move forward. There has to be some momentum, and Feed and Conserve is a great that people should check out. I mean, it's, if you haven't already, just at least click around, sign up for the email list for information, and if you could fill out a witness slip, because a lot of that is, it does have focus on creating, hopefully, some funding potentially just for multiple areas, not just on, hey, we're going to ban food scrap from a landfill, like good luck. It's like finding value in the back end. Who's going to buy the actual finished compost? Who is going to support these companies that are processing the food scraps, and how is collection going to occur, and how are we going to increase education for residents and commercial entities that need to participate? So I think it's like a holistic approach that takes like every part of government and private institutions to kind of build that momentum towards, hopefully, government support. So it's a full scale project for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like those are all really good points. I mean, you have to make sure that the stuff coming in is clean. You don't want to, ruin the actual facility that can treat and process these materials, especially when you're trying to make a viable product from it. Okay, so my last question, then we can fully open it up to the audience, but what do you hope to see in 5 years with the organic waste treatment industry in your ideal world?
I mean, I can go again. I mean, really quick. I mean, in 5 years, from my perspective, I hope that there's more like national brand level commitment of large institutions that value the starting and continuing programs to compost, so that these institutions can lead the way. The large providers are the large creators of food waste. I think I would love to see like a momentum in a positive way towards them really stepping up and taking on these programs and kind of being leaders in the space. And I think that that's kind of what Block Bins is, we work towards, is like, we try to be tip of the spear with operational and our tech stack to try and be providers of as much as we can on that space, to be as valuable as we can to a commercial entity. But at the end of the day, like, the entity has to have like the inherent value that they value that food scrap recycling, and that they think that that's a part of their company ethos. So I hope that in 5 years, maybe that's a short amount of time, but over time that momentum builds, and we could see more just engagement from those larger institutions that are creating a lot of food scrap on their side.
I'll I started with a lot of numbers and figures, so I'm going to answer this question with a much more sort of touchy-feely answer. But I would love to see the social uh, and cultural norm around composting kind of shift the way that like anti-littering campaigns helped make littering feel like something you shouldn't do. People like makes you feel guilty about it. I'd love to see people like hesitate before throwing food into a trash can because it just feels wrong. Recycling, which is not is a bit of a scam in some ways, but the recycling campaigns that some of the large corporations paid for to offset their guilt, um, they did have that effect of like making people think about what's happening with this aluminum can or this plastic thing. Um, Being able to do that for compost, but maybe in a a more meaningful way where each person, like the societal pressure is do the right thing with these food scraps because it's just the right thing to do, and anything else is contributing to the problem.
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer, Adam. I'd say this is a super specific thing. I think a major reason why recycling is so like popular and as like a concept and people think about it is the recycle logo is like so iconic. And if you're an art person out there, a graphic designer, if someone could design a compost logo that is just as iconic, that would be awesome. I think that would actually help a lot. That's totally obviously like, I think there's more important things, but probably in terms of like where funding can go. But if someone out there can design a compost logo like the recycle logo, that'd be awesome. I've only seen like ones that are kind of imitations.
I feel like this is not like a super businessy answer, but I think the idea of, and you can see this in the EPA's food recovery hierarchy, right? That like with the problem of food waste, like first we should try to just reduce food waste. And yes, that means like us business per se. I still think there's plenty of food waste out there regardless. I think after that it asks like let's donate more to people. I want to see more robust funding and infrastructure for like people who go to grocery stores and like pick up stuff to donate to food pantries, stuff like that. And then finally, I think like more investment into composting for the things that like you really need it for, right? Like when you're gonna have a factory that like is gonna have like contaminated stuff or like but I think there's a lot of really great progress that like IECs and NRDC are working on stuff like sell by dates and all those things. But I think like attacking the food waste problem at each step of the ladder, I think is going to be really important too.
Yeah, I'd say in 5 years, I'd love to see the composting and food recovery be treated as an essential infrastructure, right? Essential, not a nice to have. And that we can kind of avoid the whole like this is the individual's fault, right? Like, and it's not, it's a system. We are in a system that we can change. And what is such good news is we have the answers. Like we don't have to like do a moonshot program or split an atom or like, right? Like we have the answers right here, literally right here in this space. So I'd say in 5 years, getting Mayor Johnson's attention and actually prioritizing this, getting Springfield to actually put resources towards creating a system that will work so much better for us. Like it's totally possible. Let's go and do it.
I didn't want to lose that question that's up top. It's probably for Susanna, but it's an interesting, just maybe talk a little bit something a little bit off topic, but like what kind of space do you need to open a commercial compost site? I think that's an interesting question because space is always a concern. Creating new spaces and converting old ones takes time and effort. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. I know obviously Green Air is a very unique project, but yeah, I think that's an interesting question about just our spaces and how we can use them to their optimum ability.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I feel like part of this is kind of going to like environmental justice principles, right? Where like traditionally a lot of like waste and pollution goes to communities that like are poor or black or brown or just like otherwise don't have the political ability to fight like a polluting facility being placed in their neighborhood. And like I think that's number one is like where are you going to put it? And regardless of regardless of whether that's like urban or rural, like there is pollution everywhere. And I think number one is, when you're thinking about how much space you need, it's not just about having like a brownfield to work on, right? It's about like, you know, making sure that you're talking to the community that are around you, right? Like making sure like, hey, like what are we doing to like reinvest back in this community? I think a big part of it is like local opposition. There was actually a big digester that like was processing like um, 200 million tons or pounds of food waste a year in Michigan, and they were shut down because the local community was like, it stinks to like high heaven in here, right? So that's a big part of it there. Green Era is, partially community owned. That means like our profits, when we make profits, a portion of those go back into the Auburn Gresham community. I don't think that Green Era exactly should exist in its current form everywhere, but I think thinking about how it fits with like the local environment really works. I think, another big part of what we do at Green Era is this entire facility is indoors, right? And there's a ventilation system in the building where if you open up one of our big doors, like the air gets sucked in rather than it gets pushed out, right? And so I think like when we talk about like what's needed for a compost yard, like we need to kind of be designing for like the full thing, right? Like not just a place to dump waste and kind of like continue like the worst things that happen in a waste yard, right? Because we've seen even this year, like multiple compost yards have been shut down by the EPA for fires, for pollution, for odor, and for smoke. And so yeah, like I think it's a complicated question. There are people who are doing composting in their backyards, which is really cool. I think that's a really cool way of making it like hyper local and sovereign. But if you're going to do anything at scale, you need to make sure that there are safeguards and protections and that you are communicating with the people who are going to be affected by it every day.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I know that Tommy just mentioned that DC and Boston are really good examples of like cities creating good roadmaps for Chicago. Do you want to touch on that a bit more about why they serve as a good example?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about it. I know, like in DC area, they just made it a lot easier to create small scale compost facilities that are basically mostly on farms. And in Illinois, just like more technically, like you basically are being cited as a new landfill essentially. If you're going to open up a commercial composting facility, which to a certain level, if you're going to build like a huge facility, that'd be great. That I think that makes sense. But finding an in between ground, something more you know medium scale, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think is what I like about what's going on in DC and Maryland, and also like just collaboration with the existing compost companies who have been doing this work for a long time, and private public partnerships when it comes to those facilities, I think is going to be something that could is what's happening out there that I would love to see here as well. Green Area I know is not owned by the city. It's its own thing. And yeah, that's what I like about Maryland and Boston is this like the private public partnership side of things and the scaling. They're not going from 0 to 100 overnight. They have drop off points. They have pilot programs, curbside going on in different neighborhoods, and have real plans in the works to expand those programs.
No, it's a very
Unique.
good. Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
No,
No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say, I was just going to say unique solutions for unique locations and actually attempting with broad, open discussion and like stated action plans on what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve those things. Um, might sound simple, but yeah, I mean, we've yet to kind of even broach that. I mean, obviously at an organizational level, we're all doing that, but I'm thinking more of like at a municipal kind of like what Tommy's talking about, growth at a city level. I mean, that takes, true infrastructure dedication to something, and collaborating with everyone to create something like that, which we just have not seen yet, from Chicago in general. And then I don't know if we want to get into that. We can, it depends, but there was multiple questions about certified compostables and compostable packaging. I don't know if anyone wants to dive into that specifically. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's of interest to anybody, but yeah, I know it's like mildly controversial, but I think from my perspective, I think like we are just a little bit reliant on single use everything. So I think as much as we could get away from single use anything, I don't really, in my mind, if it's compostable or not, like I don't really think building infrastructure on single use is something that is a long-term solution. So that's just my not I don't want to be negative about compostables and compostable packaging because like, there's been a lot of like work and things that have gone into creating those and then also like verifying them and making sure they do biodegrade, and things like that. But I think from our perspective or from my personal perspective, I just think, yeah, any sort of reuse that we can promote is going to be 1,000 times more beneficial than just burning single use anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in this with you, Kyle, if you want. I think the main thing why people aren't accepting them facilities is because often they come with other things. Not everything that's compostable. Things that are compostable look the same as things that are not compostable, and really, we don't have technology that's sorting that stuff out. And so a lot of these facilities are just really worried that like, hey, I'm not going to be able to know what's compostable and what's not. I'm not going to be able to see like a really small BPI logo on a product. Totally fair. I think. And so a lot of states are trying to develop, associated with EPR, like regulations around what compostable products look like, and how they can make the lives of the facilities that are taking them in easier, and not taking on all this burden of pulling out plastic bags and cups that look like the other products that are compostable, stuff like that. So I think that's a major thing, but there's a reason why the city of Chicago is communicating their food scrap drop-off point as food only. It's because there's a lot of food that's going to the landfill, and that's the thing that we should be focusing on first. So if it takes focusing language just on food, I think that's a fair trade-off, at least in the short term.
As Kyle alluded to, here's my controversial take, which is I think at Green Arrow we do not accept compostables, and I know of many other compost yards that also do not accept compostables. And I think, as Kyle and Tommy both mentioned, there's like a multitude of reasons for this, right? That like things are not sorted out correctly all the time. I think another kind of big incentive issue is that the people who manufacture compostables are not incentivized to make sure that they actually degrade. They are incentivized to sell them, and that is like a really big thing there. Where like at Green Era, like a lot of times the compostables that we are receiving like do not actually compost. Like maybe they compost in a lab in a certain amount of time, but they're not field tested, right? I think the other thing is that like if it's BPI certified, like that's well and all. I think a part of BPI certification is making sure that it doesn't have PFAS in it. But who's verifying that every customer is buying BPI certified material, right? I think there is like a risk management that calculus that has to happen where like would a composter rather accept some food waste with compostables or just be shut down completely and not be able to create soil that is like able to be given to farmers, right? And I think ultimately like a lot of that goes back to the manufacturer, who like in a lot of times is making like a lot of money off the compostables. So
Yeah, no, and Catherine, do you want to touch on what happens when like this compostable packaging goes to landfills? Because from my understanding, they have more like an adverse impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just am really resonating with it Kyle? Someone said, look, let's just maybe not do this, make make dispo waste economy. Yeah, it's not working out, guys. But yes, great. You made something compostable. It ends up in the landfill. Great. It's going to degrade with the rest of the organic waste and create methane and also contribute to all the problems, right? So, yeah, that's I am not saying I know what is happening on the ground in every landfill in Illinois, but that is an obvious. It's not special. It's not a unicorn material when it hits the landfill.
And even too, it's like, even if it was, so say it was accepted and it did work and all the facilities,
Yeah.
every single facility, it worked for every single facility, which is not the truth. But let's just say it did. Like, you still have to have the compost hauler and infrastructure to get it to the facility. Like, there are so many instances where like vendors, whatever, locations, they have compostable serviceware and they're just landfilling it. And no, because none of the infrastructure, there isn't, not everyone has a compost hauler, every building like in the loop, like, so who, it doesn't matter if the if the vendors have composable forks. Like, it's just kind of like, unless the entire system is built up, like, and can survive and really, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I start to think the plot is lost. Like, I think that we need to, yeah, I think our culture, we did the same thing with plastic. We were just addicted to single use because it was so easy and it made life very simple. And I think that like getting in that mindset with compostables would be like a mistake to go down that road, because we're kind of earlier on adoption ish. So like, we're basically like repeating history with plastic that we just went down with plastics, as it makes plastics really, really, really difficult. We have all these numbers and they aren't accepted. And it's like facilities can only take a certain number and they don't want, it can't be contaminated. It's like, we already went down that path. So like, why would we do that again with compostable serviceware? Why don't we, like Tommy said, let's focus on food. There's so much food waste. We can focus on that and we can make such a huge impact across the board. I think that's like, I think overall that's what we can do as as just a community, as try and build infrastructure to focus on food scrap recycling, because there's a lot out there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And just to touch on that, I feel like there's sometimes just like a lack of education too, where people they might just see, oh, compostable, and then they send it to a landfill thinking that it's actually better if they just end up sending it to a landfill if they don't have the infrastructure in place to send it to a composting facility. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword. These people might think that they're doing the right thing when it ends up not even in the right place.
But like, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy again. Like, I'll try to be a positive yeah, positive. You guys, we can do this, right? Like it's just not, yes, the system is, I'm not saying it's not, you have to be precise in your policy solution, but we know where the landfills are. We know who the landfill companies are, right? Like, we know who our policymakers are. This is you have a winning hand, is what I'm trying to say. More jobs, more people drinking cleaner water, more people breathing cleaner air, right? Addressing, straight up racism and cumulative impacts. That's the hand that I think you have when you work on this issue. It's a really good one. Oh, feed hungry people, right? So it's a matter of just moving this up people's priority list. So I'm glad y'all are on this too, because you already care. So I just preached to the choir.
Okay. There's another question that Maddie sent in a bit earlier, but she said, would it be valuable to create bill ideas and lobbying the state or legislator or municipalities to start reducing the landfill contracts bit by bit, redirecting money to small local companies as they grow and employ locals over a period of time? Catherine, feel like you would be fit to answer this.
Oh, but why don't you speak? Because Illinois Environmental Council is doing all this amazing work.
Yeah, so let me see. It is important, but I feel like there might be more satisfactory ways to go about it instead of reducing landfill contracts bit by bit, because either way, landfills, they do sort of need to exist to take in other sort of ways. you can't just decrease its capacity. Maybe you can like increase the timeline that it's active
Yeah.
for, but not decrease how much they're taking in.
Yeah, I see your point. Thank you. I just didn't want to speak, not from I know you guys are running a lot of bills. But Maddie, I validate the idea, which is it feels like they're operating kind of like a monopoly, or that's like how it ends up is if you get an exclusive contract, right? Or if you get like, who's going to open up a landfill down the road anyway, right? Like this is not a fair, so to speak, system we're in. So the question is like, how do you chip away or like get more solutions that are on more equal footing? And that's the question. So you can, someone mentioned it, right? Like look at when the damn contracts are up in the city of Chicago, right? Like or any other, city in terms of, who's moving waste around and why. And then at the state level, you can, and I think California has tried to do this in different ways, right? Like the state sets like who's responsible for making sure the waste goes somewhere. So you could think about legislation at the state level, which essentially says, hey, you really got to like grow um, this locally based, right? Like systems that are more resilient and more about keeping the money in the community, right? And not just going to the usual suspects, right? So sort of like directing the cities to like make better choices in that sense. And again, like all this, I think needs a ton of just transparency. Shine a light on this, like folks are saying, and we get a bit more action. So you could also just think of like, hey, publish how much money you're making, Republic and WM off of all these. They're making a lot of
Yeah, that's definitely true. Okay, there is one other question in the Q&A. This is a bit different, but do any of your organizations provide solutions for recycling or composting textile waste in the Chicago area?
I don't think it's usually practical to compost textiles because it usually comes with, you can compost a lot of the materials, but it does end up, there's other things in those clothes for a lot of stuff, especially newer clothes that are often have plastics integrated into them that are not going to break down. So, and my understanding, textile recycling is mainly happening overseas. And if there's recycling going on, it's usually people collecting it here, shipping it overseas.
Yeah, I kind of like went on a rabbit hole with this once, and I talked to somebody who was like kind of in the industry, and they said even if it's just like even if it is cotton, like 100%, like even the stitches could be. So it's like, you know, it's very difficult to get just like a pure piece of like something that can be recycled. So that's yeah, that would be something right. I think it's like done, yeah, mass. I don't know of anybody who's doing that like in Illinois proper right, currently. Not sure if there's a marketplace at the end, because at the end of the day, with all this recycling stuff, like somebody has to buy it. So that's part of the, you know, somebody's got to find value in the end product. So I'm not sure that would really, or at least I haven't seen it currently.
Okay, we have a minute left. So, does anyone want to give like their closing remarks about this? And yeah, then that'll be the end.
You should do closing remarks.
No, I mean, I want to,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I'll do
One
one thing,
minute.
which is like, just be like, we can do things. Things are possible. Like, just because there's like reasons not to do something doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. And we talked a lot about negative stuff, but like, it is cool. Like, think Waste Not, Urban Canopy, and Block Bins are often put against each other on bids, and it's fun to talk in this manner with like Kyle and Adam and everyone on this call because we do share a lot of the same goals, and it's cool to be working towards something that's actually like legitimately a huge problem.
Yeah, positive vibes. I mean, we all didn't exist 20 years ago, and look at how much we're diverting now. So, it's like there's momentum. There's a ton of momentum. So it's like corporate, residential, it's all moving in a positive way. So I think that we just got to keep the ball moving forward and attack things from all angles. But yeah, it's been things, we only exist because people want to be doing this. So Illinois has been growing a ton, and we appreciate everybody that is interested in the topic. So.
All right, thank you everyone so much for joining, panelists and also participants, and I really appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
also this will be recorded too, so it'll be sent out to everyone.
Thank you.